The world believed World War II was the end of suffering. But for Korea, it was only the beginning. A single line drawn on a map turned one nation into two enemies. Families were split overnight. Cities burned. Millions paid the price for a war they never chose. This is not just a story about Korea. The Second World War had barely ended. The world was exhausted, broken, and desperate for peace. But on a small peninsula in East Asia, peace never arrived. Instead, Korea became the first battlefield of a new global conflict, a silent war between two superpowers, communism versus capitalism. This is the story of how Korea was divided, how millions of innocent lives were destroyed, and how a so-called forgotten war reshaped the modern world. Korea is a small nation located between China and Japan. Its name comes from the ancient Goryeo dynasty, followed by the Joseon dynasty, which ruled the peninsula for nearly 500 years. In 1910, everything changed when Imperial Japan annexed Korea and turned it into a colony. For the next 35 years, Koreans were enslaved, forced into labor, and dragged into wars that were never theirs. Korean women were imprisoned in military camps as comfort women, and an entire nation was stripped of its identity. In 1945, Japan surrendered after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Korea was finally free, but that freedom came at a terrible cost. As World War II ended, two new superpowers stood victorious, the United States and the Soviet Union. Though they had fought together, their visions for the future were completely opposite. The Soviet Union wanted to spread communism across the world, while the United States wanted to expand capitalism and stop communism at all costs. To avoid direct conflict, Korea was divided along the 38th parallel. North Korea came under Soviet influence, while South Korea was controlled by the United States. This division was meant to be temporary, but it soon became permanent. In South Korea, the United Nations supervised elections, and Syngman Rhee, a US-educated anti-communist, became president. In the North, elections were rejected, and with Stalin's support, Kim Il-sung took power. Two governments now claimed authority over the entire Korean peninsula. The division proved disastrous for ordinary Koreans. In South Korea, left-wing supporters were arrested, tortured, and executed. In 1948, the Jeju Island massacre shocked the nation, as nearly 3,000 civilians were killed while protesting Korea's division. Tensions between North and South continued to rise, and by 1950, war was inevitable. On June 25, 1950, North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel at dawn. Backed by Soviet tanks and weapons, over 1.3 million soldiers stormed into South Korea. South Korean defenses collapsed, and Seoul fell within days. Even after US troops arrived from Japan, North Korea continued advancing. By August 1950, nearly 90% of South Korea was under Northern control. In desperation, the South Korean government committed another horrific act, the Bodo League massacre, killing nearly 200,000 suspected communist sympathizers. This conflict was no longer just a civil war. It had become a global confrontation. The United Nations demanded that North Korea withdraw, but the demand was ignored. Under UN Resolution 83, a multinational force from 21 countries was formed, led by American General Douglas MacArthur. In September 1950, MacArthur launched a daring amphibious landing at Incheon. The operation succeeded. UN forces retook Seoul and pushed North Korean troops back across the 38th parallel, and continued advancing north. By October, Pyongyang was captured. China issued a warning through India, stating that it would intervene if UN forces moved closer to its border. The warning was ignored. The United States launched massive bombing campaigns across North Korea, flattening cities and destroying schools, hospitals, and homes. In November 1950, China entered the war. More than 150,000 Chinese soldiers crossed the Yalu River in a surprise counterattack. UN forces were overwhelmed, and Seoul fell once again. MacArthur requested permission to use nuclear weapons, but the request was denied, and he was removed from command. General Matthew Ridgway took over and stabilized the front. From 1951 onward, the war turned into a brutal stalemate. Battles were fought over hills and valleys, Incheon River, Pyongyang, Triangle Hill, and Bunker Hill, where thousands died for a few feet of land. By mid-1951, both armies were once again facing each other near the 38th parallel. The world slowly realized that this war could not be won. After years of failed negotiations, the United Nations proposed a final solution. In 1953, a buffer zone near the 38th parallel was created, the Korean Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ. The fighting stopped, but no peace treaty was ever signed. The war officially never ended. The human cost was devastating. North Korea lost nearly 2.9 million people, South Korea around 1.4 million. China lost approximately 600,000 soldiers, while the United States lost over 36,000. Millions of families were permanently divided. After the war, South Korea rose from the ashes and became one of Asia's most advanced economies, home to global brands like Samsung and Hyundai. North Korea, however, became an isolated dictatorship. Today, it remains under the control of Kim Jong-un, where the state dictates nearly every aspect of life. The Korean War is often called the Forgotten War. But for millions of Koreans, it was never forgotten. Its consequences still shape global politics today. History does not just live in the past, it decides the future. The Korean War may be called the Forgotten War, but its lessons are still alive today. If you found this story eye-opening, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more cinematic history deep dives. Every click helps keep history alive, and ensures you never miss the stories that shaped our world.